Everything you have within you as a musician will tell you how to phrase Bach. Once you see what he's saying in the notation, there is music behind it. I don't have the keys to that music. There's nobody keeping that gate between you and the music. Once you know what he's saying in his notation, the music's open to you. Look, at the end of the day, I don't know, but the great equalizer is that you don't know either, and nobody knows. So why not, right?
This is a guide, not a set of rules.
It feels like ever since the dawn of time, or at least since 1685, the polemics about how to properly play Bach have been ongoing. Some of these heated discussions can even be found on this very channel.
I mean, it seems like a misprint. It seems like Bach didn't know what he was hearing here.
But at the end of the day, something we can all agree on is that one of the most beautiful things about Bach is just how much room there is for personal creativity and expressivity. Of course, this can be accomplished with pedaling and articulation and dynamics, but one of the most important ways is with ornaments. Ornaments have historically always been a calling card for the individuality of the performer.
The harpsichord didn't have all of the dynamic range that we do now, didn't have any of the pedals that we do now, so really the only way to create a lot of interest within some of these melodies was to create ornamentation.
They're not just little squiggles that are there to make the music look more aesthetic. They're a key to fundamentally changing the music. They also give us a unique method for actually taking the music into our own hands, for finding what in the music speaks to us and emphasizing the things that we want to bring out. So today we're going to hear from two fabulous musicians, Yui and Mahan Esfahani, both of whom are going to unpack ornaments and help us understand how to approach them in our playing. What you're about to see comes from two of the newest courses on tonebase, both on the Italian Concerto. Yui helps us to understand how to play it on a modern piano, and Esfahani is working on historical instruments.
Bach's Italian Concerto was published in 1735 as part of his Klavierübung Book 2, one of the very, very few keyboard works of Bach that was published during his lifetime.
Bach actually called this Concerto nach italienischen gusto. Literally, he uses the Italian word gusto, and so he wants to transmit that this is something exotic and foreign, but also that it's a concerto. He wants to show not that he's transcribed a concerto for solo keyboard, but rather that concerto form, the idea of a big ensemble and a soloist and these things can be applied to a solo keyboard piece.
This is just one example of the depth of the content on tonebase. There is so much there that explores music from so many different angles, no matter what level you are at in your playing.
It's the perfect time to get in on tonebase as they're doing their end of the year sale. From now until the end of the year, it's 40% off all new memberships, as well as $300 off the new coaching program. With the coaching program, you have the opportunity to work one-on-one with an incredible piano teacher on the repertoire that fits you best. Be sure to check the link in the description below to get started. And don't forget that Tonebase Premium subscriptions also make a great holiday gift.
Also, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to help us bring more exciting and interesting piano content right to you here on YouTube. Now, without further ado, let's get Bach to business.
So before we jump into the first movement, I want to spend a little bit of time going over the ornaments that Bach indicates. Bach actually provided an ornamentation table for one of his sons, and so we have a pretty good idea what Bach wanted when he wrote certain ornamentation. It is very important, though, that this is a guide, not a set of rules. And so I think it's perfectly legitimate that if you find that one ornamentation might be too long for a certain passage, or you want to bring out certain notes and you want to change the trills, it's perfectly fine as long as you have a good reason for it, a good musical reason for it. But I do want to go over what Bach indicated as a guide. So the first ornament is in measure 34, and this is the accented trill. So the main note is B flat, and you have this kind of a longish squiggly line over it. So an accented trill begins from the upper note, and it ends on the lower note. And so what's important is that you have this upper note that's slightly held, and then you end with the lower note. So this entire passage would sound something like that. You might find that you don't have enough time to play all those notes, but use that as a guideline to decide on what your final choice is. The second ornamentation we find is seen in measure 46. And the main note here is G with a kind of a shorter squiggly line. And this one, once again, begins from the upper note, but this time you don't hold that first note. You simply begin the trill immediately. There might be a few exceptions, especially if the note prior to the trill is the upper note itself. So for example, if you look at measure 45, the final note of that is actually the A, the upper note. In that case, in measure 46 on the trill, it is fine to begin the trill not from the upper note A, but from G, right? So instead of, you may do that instead. And so again, it will depend on the musical effect you want to produce, but typically if the previous note to the trill is the upper note itself, you can begin from the main note, in this case, the G. The final three examples of ornamentation can be found in the second movement. Already, immediately in the right hand, right at the beginning, is an A with a squiggly line with a line going down, and that is a mordent. A mordent is a note that goes, is an ornament that goes below the main note instead of above. So in this case, you would play AGA. And typically, all of these ornaments, you will begin the first note on the beat. So you would play that first note, A, would be together with the left hand, which is kind of more elegant than, right? And so you can go over all of the mordents and kind of see if you could time it properly. In measure 17, you see another different kind of ornament. And this is, it looks like an accented trill with a tail in the first part that goes above the ornamentation. And that is a shake with an upper note prefix. And so in this case, the main note is F, and what you're going to do is play G, F, E, F. So it kind of dances around the main note before continuing on with the trill. So in this passage, you would go, it's a very elegant, kind of a fancy little trill. Now finally, the fifth and the last example of the ornamentation can be found in measure 26 of the second movement. And so you see something similar here, except the tail goes below that the trill indication. And so this is a shake with a lower prefix. The main note is G, and so this time you're going to begin from the note below the main note, which is F. So this would be So use those as a guide to go over all the accidentals in these three movements. And from that point, you can make decisions as to, I want to make this trill a little shorter. I want to start from the main note because I want to emphasize this note. But it's a very, very helpful starting point. The final ritornello at the end, I add many, many notes to this because it's the final passage. We have heard this ritornello before, and no harpsichordist would repeat the same thing the same way. So this final ritornello, beginning from measure 163, from this point, so there's a scale going going down here, so I go, same thing. Now this passage in measure 175, it's already really bitter, but I make it even more so. And a scale, because why not? Octave. Now here, there's an octave here, so I make it into a slur. But make sure you know exactly what rhythm you're playing, so I play 30-second notes. And here, instead of this, you might go, that's exciting. I do. I add a little turn here. And of course, octave at the end.
Now, of course, when we look at a piece of music, we talk about phrasing. We say, well, has the score told me how to phrase? What do the symbols on the score, which is to say the symbols other than the notes themselves, what do they mean? If I have a slur over 2 notes, what does that mean versus a slur over 3 notes versus a slur over several bars? And of course, we don't have the composers around necessarily to ask them what they meant. And of course, in the case of Bach, we also, in his other music, for example, his cantatas, his vocal music, his instrumental music, other than keyboard music, a slur means something very different than it may mean on the keyboard. Also, don't forget something that I've said in one of our videos, which is that keyboard music is bound by other inspirations, right? And I think no piece illustrates this better than the piece that we call the Italian Concerto, BWV 971 in F major. Now, I have something funny to tell you. It doesn't exactly have to do with phrasing, although it might help you to understand bars 13 and 14. In Bach's original, again, we don't have Bach's autograph of this piece, but we do have the publication that he supervised in 1735. It was a very, very fine engraving that was done with much care and much attention. And would you believe it? In the closing theme, which is, of course, we call this a ritornello because it returns at the end, he writes, or the engraver has, guess what it has in the opening ritornello? Now, every editor has gone through and said, well, I mean, we have to regularize that. That can't be right. Clearly, the engraver was an idiot, and we'll go through and we'll fix that. Look, you're talking about a culture in which people didn't even spell their name correct the same way in the same document. Look, at the end of the day, I don't know. But the great equalizer is that you don't know either, and nobody knows. So why not, right? I mean, it's quite interesting, actually. There's if I play it the way that we find it in Bach's notation in this publication, listen to how it sounds. And then when you've had the entire experience of the movement and it comes back, that's actually, I think that the contrast is lovely. And I think also it shows that the experience, because don't forget, the ritornello, the theme itself has been transformed by the piece. Why would it not be different at the end? It's something just to think about. Now, the reason why this relates to phrasing and articulation, other than the fact that it's fun, is that when you have this kind of anapestic rhythm, we call it maybe a Scotch snap or a sort of Lombardic rhythm, which means that the accent is toward the beginning. It has the quality of making you slightly articulate each chord in a way that it wouldn't otherwise. This is what I mean. If in the regularized way, it's because of course we have a slight diminuendo, or actually the accent comes after the strong part. We have a slight dissonance there, but if we have, then I separate it there. And I think that actually shows that depending on the rhythmic contour of what you're playing, you're going to articulate differently. Now, I don't have any historic evidence that one would articulate that way. It's just my own musical instinct. And I do want to make it clear here that everything you have within you as a musician will tell you how to phrase Bach. Once you see what he's saying in the notation, there is music behind it. I don't have the keys to that music. There's nobody keeping that gate between you and the music. Once you know what he's saying in his notation, the music's open to you. You have everything within you to play. I mean, of course, obviously there's technical considerations, which, but at the end of the day, we're all weak compared to Bach, and we're all searching for that thing around him. But I think actually seeing the music in that sense, will really help you sort of unlock what your instincts are. And by the way, you might say, well, I don't see accents that way. I don't see dissonance that way. This is how I see it. At the end of the day, this is my opinion of how to do it, and I'm just sort of doing it according to how I feel and how I see the music.
Thanks for joining us today on this roller coaster of ornaments. How do you approach ornaments in Bach? And how do you think about ornaments in the other pieces you're playing? Do you add ornaments to even Chopin, for example? That's an interesting conversation that maybe we can continue on this channel in the future. I love hearing from all of you, so please sound off in the comments below. It's super interesting to hear what this community has to share with each other. And be sure to give us a like, a subscribe, click the little bell, leave us a comment. All of it really helps us to continue to bring great piano content right to your computer screens. I'm Robert Fleiss from Tonebase, and I'll see you next time.